My name is Harold. I'm 55 years old, and I want to share my story with you. It's not just about losing a job. It's about betrayal, dignity, and what happens when you're cast aside by a place you gave your life to. For 17 years, I worked at a small private clinic in Northern Ontario, Canada. It wasn't one of those flashy downtown medical centers. We were a tight-knit team serving a modest community. I started there as a janitor, back when my hair was thicker and my knees didn't hurt when I stood up too fast. But I didn't stay on the bottom rung for long. Over the years, I took night courses, got certified, and worked my way up to being the lead technician in the diagnostics lab. The clinic became more than just a workplace. It was a second home. I knew everyone, from the receptionist's kids' birthdays to the quirks of the old X-ray machine we all hated but couldn't afford to replace. I trained most of the newer techs myself. People came and went, but I stayed. I always stayed. When I first met Dr. Elias Carter, the clinic's new director, I was optimistic. He came in about 3 years ago, replacing the retiring founder. Younger, ambitious, and full of new ideas. He talked about modernizing the place, bringing in digital systems, optimizing workflow. I was on board. I'd seen how outdated some of our procedures had become, and I even offered to help guide the transition. At first, Dr. Carter seemed to value me. He asked for my opinion during meetings, leaned on me during equipment upgrades, even praised my initiative in front of the staff. But slowly, almost too gradually for me to notice at first, things started to shift. New policies came in that bypassed me completely. New hires weren't being introduced to me for training anymore. Meetings I used to be part of started happening without me. And then one day, out of nowhere, he brought in his nephew. His name was Tyler, fresh out of a 1-year tech diploma program with no work experience. He was maybe 23 or 24, always on his phone, dressed like he was heading to a nightclub rather than a clinic. I assumed he'd be an intern or shadow someone. But within a week, Dr. Carter told me Tyler would be working directly under me. I tried to be welcoming. Everyone deserves a chance, right? But Tyler wasn't interested in learning. He was arrogant, dismissive, and, worst of all, careless. He made mistakes, serious ones. I had to cover for him more than once to avoid reporting errors in patient diagnostics. I documented everything, and even brought it up to Dr. Carter, who just nodded and said, "He'll get the hang of it. Give him time." Except time wasn't what he needed. He needed accountability. Then came the final blow. One Wednesday afternoon, Dr. Carter asked to speak with me in his office. I walked in thinking it might be about Tyler again. Maybe he'd finally listen to reason. Instead, he handed me a sealed envelope and avoided my eyes. "I'm restructuring the department," he said flatly. "Your position is being made redundant." Redundant. After 17 years. I opened the letter. It was a formal notice. Termination. 2 weeks severance. I don't remember much of what I said. I was numb. My ears rang. I do remember asking if Tyler would be taking over my role, and Carter didn't even pretend to deny it. "He's young. He has potential," he said. I walked out of that office like a ghost. My coworkers didn't know what to say. Some of them avoided me. Others tried to hug me. I packed my things that afternoon and drove home without turning on the radio. Silence was the only thing that made sense. I wasn't just fired. I was erased. But if Dr. Carter thought I would go quietly into retirement with my tail between my legs, he was wrong. That's when I decided to fight back. Not with anger or violence, but with everything I had left. My experience, my integrity, and a plan. The first few days after I was fired were the hardest. I'd wake up at 6:30 a.m. like clockwork, shower, get dressed, and then just sit at the kitchen table. No place to go, no routine, just the hum of the fridge and the sound of the wind outside. My wife, Janet, tried to keep things normal. She'd bring me tea, tell me we'd get through it, but I could see the worry behind her eyes. 17 years, and it was all gone. Just like that. But the thing about being older is you learn not to panic. I let myself feel the hurt, then I started thinking. really thinking. I knew that if I was going to do something, it had to be smart, strategic, legal, and lasting. I started by digging through my old files, everything I had on clinic procedures, training records, certification documents, equipment calibration logs. And of course, I still had the notes I'd taken about Tyler's errors. I'd kept everything: dates, patient IDs, descriptions of what went wrong. Everything that could prove negligence. Not mine, but his. But I wasn't going to just walk into a courtroom and start pointing fingers. That would be foolish. No, I needed something stronger. That's when I remembered Susan. Susan had worked in the admin office for nearly a decade. She was sharp, loyal, and incredibly organized. We'd always gotten along. After I left the clinic, she called me one night just to see how I was doing. That's when she let something slip. Something that lit the fuse. "Tyler's already screwed up again," she said. "A patient came in with a possible stroke. He flagged it as a migraine." My blood went cold. I asked her if she had access to any reports or logs. She hesitated, said she couldn't just hand over clinic data. But I told her to hold on to anything irregular. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. That gave me hope. In the meantime, I got busy. I started writing out everything I knew, a full report of what had happened, from the first signs of Tyler's incompetence to my firing. I reached out to a lawyer, not for a lawsuit yet, but for advice. I also contacted the provincial health regulatory body, told them I had concerns about diagnostic negligence at a private clinic. They told me they'd be willing to look into it if I could provide documentation. So that's what I focused on, building the case. But I didn't just want to get revenge. I wanted something better, something that would outlast their corruption. So I made one more move. I started talking to people in the community. Patients. Former co-workers. I found out I wasn't the only one Dr. Carter had pushed out. 2 nurses had quietly resigned after being pressured to cover up administrative mistakes. Another tech left after being blamed for a misdiagnosis that Tyler had actually made. The more I talked, the more I realized this wasn't just about me. This was systemic. With their permission, I began collecting statements, written testimonies. Some were anonymous, others signed with names and dates. All of them told the same story: a clinic that had lost its moral compass under a director who cared more about his family's career than patient safety. 3 weeks after my termination, I submitted a full report, over 50 pages long, to the health authority. I also sent a courtesy copy to Dr. Carter, just so he knew I wasn't gone. Just so he'd feel that cold knot in his stomach when he realized I had not only the truth, but the patience to use it. I didn't hear back for a while, but I didn't need to. I'd already planted the seeds. Then, one afternoon, I got a call. It was a quiet voice on the other end. "Harold, it's Susan. They just showed up at the clinic. Inspectors." I smiled for the first time in weeks. When Susan told me that the inspectors had arrived at the clinic, I didn't celebrate, not outwardly. But inside, there was this quiet fire building. Not joy exactly. More like a confirmation that the truth was finally being heard. The investigation was discreet at first. The health authority wasn't interested in making a scene. They wanted to dig quietly, compare records, audit protocols. But word started to spread anyway. Staff noticed the suits, the way the head nurse was called into meetings that lasted hours. Tyler began acting twitchy, short-tempered. Susan told me he was messing up more often, second-guessing even simple diagnostics. He wasn't built for pressure. That was becoming obvious to everyone. Meanwhile, Dr. Carter did what he always did, tried to charm his way out of it. He called a few local contacts, tried to pull political favors, said the inspection was routine. But people weren't buying it. And behind the scenes, I kept feeding the fire. I provided additional patient cases to the investigators. Ones Susan flagged as potential errors. I cross-checked them with my old calibration logs, showing when Tyler had skipped required diagnostic checks or logged times that didn't make sense. I didn't accuse anyone outright. I simply laid out facts and let the regulators do their job. It worked. A month into the investigation, the clinic was put on partial suspension. That was the first real public blow. The local paper ran a small piece on it. Ongoing quality concerns at private imaging clinic. No names, no details. But people in town started whispering. And then something I didn't expect happened. I got a job offer, a regional hospital, one I had collaborated with occasionally in my earlier years, reached out. They were opening a new diagnostic wing and needed someone experienced to consult on equipment setup and protocol design. Someone who knew the field, knew how to train new techs, and could help prevent the very kind of errors the clinic had become known for. I hesitated at first. After everything, part of me wanted to just retire, sit on my porch, sip coffee, and let the world spin without me. But the other part, the part that had built a reputation over 17 years, wasn't ready to quit. So I said yes. It was part-time, but the work felt good, clean, honest. The team respected me, listened. They didn't care that I'd been fired from a private clinic. They cared about results, and I gave them results. Back at the clinic, things were unraveling fast. One morning, Susan messaged me again. "They've suspended Tyler's license pending review," she said, "and Carter's under formal investigation for negligence." I didn't reply right away. I just sat there, rereading the message, letting the words settle in. 17 years I gave them. And in the end, it was their own arrogance that brought them down. But the final blow came a few weeks later, when I received a letter, official, stamped, and serious-looking. It was from the provincial board. They wanted to thank me for the documentation I had provided and inform me that due to my assistance, new guidelines were being proposed for all diagnostic clinics in the province. Stricter audit standards, better technician oversight, required third-party calibration logs, things I had been advocating for years. I read the letter aloud to Janet that night. She teared up. "You did something that mattered," she said softly. And she was right. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about legacy. I wasn't the man who got fired after 17 years. I was the man who stood up, exposed the truth, and changed the system. By the time winter rolled in, the clinic where I had once poured 17 years of my life was no longer the same place. It wasn't even operating anymore. Local news outlets finally caught wind of the full story. The Provincial Health Board released their findings in a public report. It included details of falsified maintenance logs, unauthorized changes to imaging protocols, and critical diagnostic errors, all under Tyler's watch, all with Dr. Carter's signature approving them. The article named names. I still remember the headline, "Private Clinic Shut Down After Safety Violations and Staff Misconduct." Beneath it, a grainy photo of Carter walking out of the building, refusing to answer reporters' questions. He looked smaller than I remembered, defeated. No smile, no polished shoes or tailored suit could hide the shame in his posture. Tyler's license was revoked for 5 years. He wouldn't be able to work in any medical imaging facility during that period, and the board made it clear any attempt to reapply would require significant retraining and psychological evaluation. He disappeared from the radar. Word was, he moved out of town. Quietly. As for Dr. Carter, the man who once smiled at me as he tore my dignity apart, he faced malpractice lawsuits from 2 families whose diagnoses had been delayed because of imaging errors. One of those patients didn't make it. I never celebrated their pain, but I did feel the weight of it. Those weren't just errors. They were consequences born of arrogance. I didn't gloat, didn't post anything online, didn't make speeches. But people knew. Former patients reached out. Even some old co-workers messaged me, the ones who had looked away while I was being escorted out. They apologized, said they were scared then that they knew something wasn't right. I didn't blame them. Fear does strange things to decent people. Susan, meanwhile, had been offered a better position at another clinic, a reputable one. She and I stayed in touch. Every so often, we'd meet for coffee, talk about how strange life could be. "You were always the glue," she told me one afternoon. "The place fell apart the minute they pushed you out." I thanked her, but I didn't feel vindictive anymore. Just tired, but in a good way, like after finishing something hard, knowing it was worth it. My part-time consulting role turned into something bigger. I was asked to help train an entire cohort of new technicians. Kids, really, fresh out of school, eager and idealistic. I saw pieces of myself in them. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was building something again. Not for someone else's profit, for the future, for the field, for the patients. At home, Janet saw the change in me. I smiled more, slept better. There was still an ache. 17 years is a long time to give someone your loyalty. But it no longer defined me. I had turned the page. One evening, while sorting through some old files, I found a photo from my 3rd year at the clinic. We were all younger then. I stood beside the original head technician, the man who'd trained me. We were both laughing at something just out of frame. No suits, no politics, just pride in the work. I looked at that photo for a long time before slipping it into a drawer. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I no longer needed to remember it with pain. I had something better now. Peace. There's something strange about starting over at 55. People assume it's the end, that your time's up, that your best contributions are behind you. But what they don't realize is, when you've seen enough, been through enough, you finally stop asking for permission. After everything that happened, the betrayal, the firing, the investigations, I stopped trying to prove my worth to people who never valued it in the first place. I built a new rhythm. Every morning, I walked to the community health center where I now work twice a week, mentoring junior staff. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. And when patients smiled and thanked me, not for a diagnosis, but for simply being kind, it reminded me why I chose this field decades ago. One afternoon, I gave a guest lecture at a local medical college. After the session, a young student came up to me and said, "Sir, your story gave me hope. I thought this field was only about politics and pressure. You made it human again." I went home that night and cried, not out of sadness, but release. For 17 years, I thought I was just another cog in a machine, replaceable, forgotten. Turns out I wasn't. I was a mentor, a standard, a quiet witness to what happens when greed meets integrity and loses. Dr. Carter ended up settling the malpractice cases out of court. His reputation was shattered. I heard he sold his share of the clinic to avoid bankruptcy. Last I checked, he was trying to open a wellness business somewhere in the suburbs. I don't follow the details. I don't need to. Tyler stayed off the radar. Maybe he's reflecting. Maybe he's still angry. That's not my burden anymore. As for me, I picked up woodworking again. Made my wife a garden bench last spring. Fixed up the fence I'd ignored for years. Even took a road trip through Alberta in an old camper van we bought on impulse. There were no grand speeches, no trophies, no applause, but there was peace. I share this with you not to gain sympathy or revenge. I don't need either. I share this because maybe someone out there, someone watching this, is going through the same thing. Maybe you've been pushed aside, replaced, lied to. Maybe you're questioning if all those years meant anything. Let me tell you, they did. You don't lose your worth because someone else doesn't see it, and you don't need to get even to move forward. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't destruction, it's reconstruction of your life, your purpose, your peace. My name is Harold. I'm 55 years old, and losing my job was the best thing that ever happened to me.